where I was like, okay, like I might actually be a narcissist, but I don't want to admit it. And then I ended up going to a sex addiction intensive. Am I a narcissist? Do I have these toxic traits? Was it my fault? Am I a narcissist? Do you ever have that question? Do you ever wonder, looking back at the relationship or looking back at the person that you just got out of a relationship, friendship, interaction with, and they called you a narcissist, and you're wondering, like, am I a narcissist? Like, what is actually going on here? Like, am I the toxic person? Like, I didn't think I was, but now I'm starting to question. Maybe you got out of a relationship that seemed to go completely south and completely not the way that you thought it was going to go. A relationship that you felt was loving or connected, and all of a sudden it seemed to be more arguments and lies and interactions and reactions and frustrations that made you start to wonder, am I causing this? Is the other person causing this? Like, what is actually going on? And a lot of times people get faced with that fact. It's faced with the question, am I a narcissist? If this is you today and you recognize this and you think like, hey, am I a narcissist? Like, leave a comment down below. Be like, hey, like, I've struggled with that question, because a lot of people have. And I don't think a lot of people understand and know that, hey, just you identifying that you struggle with it might breathe some life into someone else that's like, good, whew, I'm not the only one. If you guys are new here, I am a narcissist. My name is Ben Taylor. I'm on self-aware narcissist on this platform to provide awareness, growth, healing, and change. We do that on all different types of platforms. So check out TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. What's the rest? Amazon Music, podcast, Spotify, all those. Just look up Raw Motivations. That's where we are everywhere. Raw Motivations. But the goal is to be able to bring awareness to people of like what's actually going on. When we talk about narcissists, are we just talking about the person snapping selfies and being conceited, or what's actually going on? There's a lot more that goes into it. And so bringing awareness of what's actually going on, of what's happening in a relationship, what's happening in life, how is this actually affecting people? Because a lot of people don't know what this is. And I would encourage you today, as you listen to this episode, if it resonates, if it correlates, if there's anyone that you're like, hey, this means a lot to me, let me share this with someone else who's struggling with the same thing, share it. Because people need to know, and people need to understand that they're not crazy. But it feels like it, right? Especially when you're asking yourself, am I a narcissist? If you guys have heard some of my story, there was a moment in time, and it was at the early stages of just slightly becoming self-aware. Like, not even like a moment of light bulb of like, oh my gosh, I'm a narcissist, but like going through different aspects of learning about my personality, about empathy, even learning about like shame and vulnerability and like how that actually affected me, emotional intelligence. I remember I got to a place where in the moment I was like talking through a couple of things with my wife in the kitchen, and I was like, I don't really know like what's wrong with me. Like, I don't connect. Like, I was realizing like the empathy piece was missing. I was like, I don't connect with other people. Like, I see other people, how they interact, how they respond, like the emotions they have, like how they feel towards each other. Like, I don't, like, that's not me. Like, I don't connect that way. And I remember looking at it and I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe I'm a sociopath. And so we sat down, we looked it up and pulled it up and kind of read through it. And I was like, no, like, it doesn't really match up. And she was like, no, it doesn't really match up either. And then she turned around and she was like, actually, maybe you're a narcissist. And I was like, what? And so we looked up narcissist, and we looked it up and we started going through it. And I was like, no, like, this isn't me. Like, maybe I have like a trait or two, but like, this isn't actually me. That's not something that I struggle with. And while she started realizing that part of the journey, that what she stumbled on was the truth of me being a narcissist, it wasn't something that I was willing to admit. And it wasn't something I was willing to actually acknowledge, this is something that I struggle with. And so as a result, I ended up making sure that I made it look like that it wasn't something I struggle with, as I gaslit my wife, going to multiple different people and, explaining, like, can you believe, like, she thought I was a narcissist? Like, do you see? Like, here's the traits. Like, it doesn't even seem to match up. And got other people onto my side. Got my posse, got my gang, in one sense, onto my side to admit, like, yeah, no, he's not a narcissist. I actually stumbled across a picture that I had a little while ago, a screenshot that Kayla sent me. In it actually said, it was a couple years ago, it actually said, like, you'll be happy to know, like, so-and-so says they don't think you're a narcissist, you just have traits too. And that was one of the people that I had in my life that I was, like, actively going around being like, hey, make sure, like, you let her know, like, I'm not a narcissist. And so very manipulative in there at the beginning. It was something that I didn't want to admit. I didn't want to admit the possibility of there being something wrong with me because I didn't think there was something wrong with me. I noticed there was cycles, there was like issues, but it wasn't something that I wanted to admit. Like I wanted to keep that mask up. Like asking even about if I was a sociopath was like a small slip in the mask. And then it went right back up because I didn't want to be approached with that accountability and that vulnerability of who I may actually be. Well, I didn't want to admit that, but then I ended up getting involved in another affair, which was with a girl who had BPD and narcissistic traits. And in engaging with that, I started seeing aspects of what I was doing on a day-to-day basis, like the gaslighting, the lying, the forgetting, like all the different things that I started like seeing. I was like, wait a second, like this doesn't make sense. Like, how are you stringing me along and then going with someone else and then stringing them along? Like, there's a lot of different things that I started like putting pieces together. Like, wait a second, that's actually like something I do. That's actually something that I see that I exemplify. And so I started like opening up or getting like more of an idea of like what's going on. And just so you know, I'm leaving out like a lot of different parts. So I'm leaving out like Wake Up Warrior, different tests that I took, like finally getting to therapy. Like I'm leaving out a lot of different things. But like I'm trying to be able to explain like the aspect of like questioning like, am I a narcissist? Well, I got to the place where I was like almost convinced. Where I was like, okay, like I might actually be a narcissist, but I don't want to admit it. And then I ended up going to a sex addiction intensive. It was like a 3-day intensive. It was like all day stuff, and went to it, got involved with it, made my trauma egg, like a bunch of things that happened in there, and ended up walking away from it and realized I wasn't a sex addict. I was just a narcissist. And there was different addictions, different things that I had that were exemplifying an outpouring of the narcissism inside me. From there, it took a little while to find a therapist because one of the therapists, for instance, one of the therapists I went to, didn't want to acknowledge the stuff that I was seeing. And so there was a part of me that was starting to try to convince the person, like, hey, like, I think I'm a narcissist. And they're like, no, I think you have ADHD. And I'm like, no, like I've looked through the traits. I've even gone through, just random tests and stuff just to see. And I was like, I don't have that. Like, that's not something I struggle with. And I remember like interaction, I was like, okay, like I'm done with that therapist. Like, let me try to find another one. And I finally, after 3 or 4 different therapists, I found one that I felt was safe. And was actually a place that didn't have any judgment, that I could actually say like, hey, like, am I a narcissist? Is this something that I struggle with? You see a lot of times when you see on social media and out there in different parts of like people responding and commenting different people, you have people that ask this question, am I a narcissist? And almost, I wouldn't say always, but a lot of times you see the immediate knee-jerk response of like, well, if you're asking, then you're probably not one. And I get where a lot of people are coming with that because they're saying like, hey, like narcissists, you probably can't self-reflect, all this kind of stuff that you probably can acknowledge. But there's also a big aspect that I think we're slowly starting to stigmatize people by saying that. And I don't think it's right to say that. Give you 2 examples would be me and Lee Hammock, mental illness. Like, we both had times, he contacted his therapist through email, I sat down and talked to her. Like, we both had times when we asked and we communicated to our therapist, like, hey, I think I might be a narcissist. Like, I think this might be something that I actually have. And if either one of them would have said, well, if you're asking, probably wouldn't, you probably don't have it, there could have been a huge aspect that we wouldn't be here today. I know for me personally, there wouldn't be an aspect of me being here today if I had someone else, especially an authority figure, like validate that I'm not, just by thinking through that. So I want to caution us. I want us to be careful. Now, are there ways that narcissists confuse other people, make other people feel like narcissists? 100%, absolutely. I'm not discounting that at all. So if that's someone here is like all upset about that, like I'm not saying that, okay? What I'm saying is let's be careful of just that knee-jerk response of like, hey, am I a narcissist? Well, if you're asking, then you're probably not. What I've seen more and more, even recently, as more exposure gets brought to narcissism, is I've started to see some people that start using that in an abusive way. A covert narcissist that's abusing their spouse goes to therapy, asks the therapist, am I a narcissist? And the therapist says no, or I can't diagnose you yet, or whatever it might be. And they go home and be like, I'm not a narcissist, so like you're an idiot. And they keep doing what they're doing. So let's be really careful about that. A lot of times I noticed in my life that I probably wouldn't have changed if I would have had someone else back that up. If you think you're a narcissist today, or if you don't know what narcissism is, like really quick, download the Narc app. because inside there it actually walks through the 9 narcissistic personality traits of narcissistic personality disorder. Okay, so like you have to have at least 5 out of the 9 to consider being like diagnosed or consider having NPD. Okay, it's not on there to diagnose. I'm not here to diagnose. I'm a coach to try to help people get clarity from the confusion, but like that's on there. Just download the NARC app, NARC. Okay, but look up those traits of what NPD is. And see, how does this actually match up in my life? Like, what do I actually see exemplified of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis in these traits? Maybe you have some trusted friends and family that you can go to and be like, hey, like, do you see this in me? Is that easy to do? No. But that's something that you need to do if you're wondering, hey, is this me? Like, am I struggling with this? Or what aspects of this do I adhere to? Or what aspects of this do I pick up traits of that I need to work on? Because we all have stuff that we need to work on. We all have stuff that we need to work on growing and changing. Maybe you need to look back on your past relationships and see how many people called you a narcissist, or how many people called you toxic, or, how many people, like for instance, like how many people called you bipolar when you've never been like called bipolar before, but inside the relationship with the narcissist, all of a sudden you're diagnosed bipolar from a toxic person. Okay. Also, when you look at your life, what are you actively doing on a day-to-day basis to heal, grow, and change? Like, how are you developing yourself on a day-to-day basis? And is it trackable? Is it something you're like, hey, I'm doing therapy, or I'm going to this, or I'm journaling, or I'm progressing in this aspect? Like, all different types of things to try to say, like, hey, like, I'm putting in the work. Because a lot of times you have other people that aren't willing to put in the work. And anyone out there can put in the work if they're willing to be honest and vulnerable and continue to work on that consistent change. Because I think we can all heal. I think we can all grow in multiple different ways. I think everybody can change and develop and grow to be a new version of themselves, to be able to help the world, to be able to help their life, to be able to help their passion, their purpose, their calling, like all different types of things. But it all comes down to the fact of like, how honest are you going to be with yourself? How vulnerable are you going to be? And what resources, tools, and people are you going to bring into your life to help you grow, to help you heal, and to help you change? If I can be of service to that, would love to talk to you. You can go to rawmotivations.com. You can click the link down below. Would love to interact with you. But if you're struggling today with, am I a narcissist? Let's get you some clarity so that you're not confused running around thinking that you are or thinking that you aren't when you never know.